One. Hello, everyone. My name is Pittsburgh Pat. I'm here with Craig Zolas. How are you today, Craig?
Hey, real good, real good.
It's great to
Thank you.
see you.
Yeah, definitely. We
Yeah,
go way
awesome.
back.
Yeah, we go way back. There's no doubt. We're gonna have a conversation today about Zen Buddhism. Who knows? Maybe we'll even touch on a little bit of Star Trek. We'll Craig and I used to sit at diners and talk until 3 a.m. over coffee about this sort of stuff. So now we're gonna give all of you the pleasure of being able to experience that as well. And if you would do us a favor though and smash the like button, because that helps other people to see it as well, because the YouTube algorithm will promote the video. And having done that business, let's jump right in. So when we were growing up, we knew each other in our teens. Well, you introduced me, I think, to this book actually.
Oh, maybe, yeah.
Zen and the Martial
That's a
Arts. I
while
remember you had
ago.
a copy of this. And I read it, and it's a really great little book. It has like little 2-3 page like lessons about like the ideas behind Zen. But I guess we should probably talk about, I'll get back to that. I guess we should probably actually ask you. So Zen Buddhism, is there a difference? Like, what's the difference?
Between,
Yeah, like when you hear the word Zen, you could say Zen, but
yeah,
usually
yeah.
it's followed by Zen Buddhism, which is
A whole
something.
different, yeah.
Is it?
Not even a whole different. It is just Zen is a school. Well, it started. Let's go back, and we can go back to our intro talks that I do. For I should preface by saying I've been practicing Zen Buddhist for 4.5 or so years, 4.5, 5 years. And there's a Zen temple. In fact, it's the only Zen temple in Pittsburgh. It's the Zen Center of Pittsburgh, and you can take a look at that. deepspringzen.org.
We'll
Yeah.
put all of these links in the description below for everyone, so
Yeah.
so that we'll do that in post. But yeah, and actually, you're on the board or the president of a.
I was, yeah, both. I was after attending for a while, and they asked me if I wanted to be on the board, just since I was getting involved in things going on there. I said, sure, yeah, okay, guys. I don't know what it's about, but let's check it out. And that just evolved into one thing after another. And the president at the time, he was done. He was retiring, actually retiring from corporate world. And he said, I don't have time for all of this anymore. He wanted to travel, so. So they nominated me, and yeah, the Sangha said, okay, sure. And I've been doing that now for a couple of years as president of the board. So yeah, I've been pretty involved in that sort of thing. And we do talks. That's what I was going to say. We do introductory lessons, myself and another member, actually the treasurer of the board. And so we usually start with a little bit of history. So Zen was founded by a man named Gautama Buddha. Well, he's known as Gautama Buddha. At any rate, founded in India. And then slowly spread throughout his followers. It spread throughout and took a couple of different branches, and those branches broke up into a couple of major threads. So Mahayana was one, Theravada, and it all depends on which way it went through Asia. So the one that went,
it's geographic.
It's geographic. So
okay.
One went south.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the Theravadan type of thought process, and the Mahayanas were more through China, and then from China to Japan. So there was an order or a way of thought in Buddhism at the time called Ch'an, and Ch'an was a Chinese version of it, and that's the precursor to Zen.
Okay.
A fellow in about the 12th century Japan named Dogen Zenji traveled to China to see what this was all about. He got influenced by Chan, brought it back, and basically translated it to Zen. So Chan is Zen, and then Zen Buddhism then was what he founded, the Soto Zen school. And it also split off into a couple of other, there's Rinzai Zen and another branch, even less known branch, which escapes me at the moment. But Mahayana tradition, and I am in the Soto Zen school, if you will.
Okay.
And what all that really means is how they approach it. There are many, many different sects, just like in Christianity, there's many different sects of Buddhism. and Zen Buddhism, and Soto Zen in particular is just one small subset of it. Soto Zen is often called the farmer Zen. It was for the working people. It was much more earthy, much more down to earth rather.
Practical.
Rinzai, practical. And the Rinzai Zen was more of the samurai, the nobleman got involved with that, or partook in that so much.
Gotcha.
So at any rate, that's a little background on what the whole Zen thing is. Zen just means meditation. That's all. It just means meditation.
That's all that means.
Yep. So Zen is just meditation. And that school, and that's what I was saying, the different sects sort of take on their own, they take on their own focus, whatever they think is most appropriate. So some Buddhist schools really focus on chanting. And they spend most of the session chanting. For us for Soto Zen, the session on Sundays, and they have them multiple times a week, but Sunday is just kind of like the easiest for people to get to. So that's the main one. Is 40 minutes of sitting, Zazen, and followed by 10 minutes maybe of chanting, just a little bit of a chant, and then moving into a soji or work period, and then some more of a social period. And there's a teaching, there's a Dharma talk in between there. So, and it takes an hour or 2 hours maybe tops. We've been doing a lot of that both online and in person, kind of a mutated form right now. So whichever appeals to you, you can certainly, if you feel more comfortable sitting at home.
So is it a hybrid? Is it the same service, but it's just telecast?
It's just broadcast, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And then, and anybody can participate at any time?
For the Zoom, yes. It would make more sense though, what we try to encourage people, especially as a prerequisite to coming into the center or to coming in person, would be to attend one of the training sessions, which is like $10. It's just maybe an hour and a half of your time, just to sort of go over what I'm talking about here.
Cool.
Give you a little background, and also more into the forms, what's going on around you, the smells and bells. It's a little different than Christianity. You know, if a non-Catholic would go to a Catholic service, they'd be lost. You know, as far as when we stand, when do we sit, you know.
Okay.
So there's just to get used to the forms, the process, and the flow of the ceremony.
Very cool.
But again, it's my priest likes to stress, it's yours, it's your session. You know, this is your Zendo. So there is no doing it wrong. So don't be afraid to if you're going to make a mistake. You know, don't worry about it.
That's good to know. I mean, it's interesting that I always find it interesting when I talk to people about meditation. I have a daily meditation practice. I have been doing that for quite some time, but I've been doing it intensely for the last 7 years or so, on a daily basis, like as a commitment to myself. And people will say, "Oh my gosh, I can't meditate. I can't keep my mind empty for 10 minutes." I said, well, I've got good news for you. Neither can the Dalai Lama.
Right. No one can.
So it's impossible to do that for any great length of time. Your mind is a thought generating organ. That's what it does. And it's going to keep doing that. And a lot of times when I find when new meditators start practicing with this and messing with it, their thoughts are even more intense than when they're not meditating at first.
A lot of people aren't used to being in their own head for any period of time.
Or just quiet to have a place like you're talking about, which is like, you know, a place where everyone's kind of focused on the same thing and they're all going to be quiet at the same time.
Yes.
I remember doing that in a communal setting for a few years back, but like I said, about 7 years ago. And I remember having this irrational urge to scream during the silence, you know, just running from the room like Daffy Duck or something, like,
I'm told it has happened. I'm told it does happen.
I've never seen it happen, but I've
never seen it either. But no, I'm told, don't be surprised if someone does freak out a little bit or have to get up and leave, you know. It can happen. Yeah.
but it's okay. And and the thing you're encouraging and the thing that I've been taught is that it's okay to have those feelings. Those are natural,
Mhm.
feelings. Anything that you
Feelings are just
experience is
visitors. Yeah.
perfectly natural.
Mhm.
You know, like you
Yeah,
said,
there's
it's yours.
I think it was Dogen was asked, or asked one of his pupils, or maybe it's, I think it was I think it was a Dogen story. I'd have to, where he's saying that a bird flies in the sky, never hits the end of the sky, and a fish swims in the ocean, never finds the end of the sea. What does man do? And the answer is think. We just think endlessly. The thoughts are just constantly going and never come to an end. Um, so for anybody, like you were saying, for anybody who wants to blank their mind or thinks that meditation is just blanking your mind, nah, only when you're dead. It's like, and even then there's some, I don't know, it depends what happens.
Well, I
But
mean, there's different kinds of meditation too.
oh yeah, many different. Yeah,
So you can have like
this
a
is an
direct,
insight school.
say
Mhm.
again.
What you and I are talking about, I think, is the insight school of meditation. Um, what you're describing is very like zazen, and so that's Zen meditation. Za means sitting, so it's just sitting meditation. And even then, there are many different flavors and ways to do that. I practice shikantaza, which is just sitting, where you're not trying to do anything, you're not putting any mantras in your mind, you're not trying to think through or chant anything. You're just allowing the thoughts to rise, um, along with the feelings. Thoughts are often attached to feelings, or feelings to thoughts. It's how our brain seems to get our attention. Like the more powerful an emotion tied to a thought, and that's what you obsess on.
Hmm.
So it seems to be that that's the idea. So the idea with zazen is to let those thoughts and feelings come up and just observe them. And oh yeah, why is that making me anxious? That's making me anxious. Um, the priest's wife told me one good practice is just to name them as you're feeling emotions. Just name them. Oh, that's fear, or that's anxiety, or why am I nervous? And oh, that's pain. My leg's falling asleep. Yeah, so it happens.
No,
Uh,
I think that's interesting, and that's actually used as a psychological technique for a lot of people that are
yeah,
dealing with anxiety and fear and those sorts of things. Is to because once it seems like once we place a label on it, once we
mhm,
can name something, then we can, instead of having it be this amorphous thing that's occurring in our minds,
yeah,
we can then separate ourselves from it,
correct.
and then we're easier able to observe it. And once we're able to observe it, then we can start to do something about it. Then we
Well,
can
then you start to
recognize
deep
it as a
dive into it.
pattern and we can change it.
Yeah, yeah, that's the deep water in Buddhism. Is after you've been observing your thoughts and you realize your thoughts are not me. I'm observe. Otherwise, how could I observe them? So wait a second. Who am I and who are the thoughts? And
That's a pretty profound
that
moment.
gets into the deep water.
Yeah. Yeah. When that first happens, it's pretty, it's a little alarming. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's like, whoa, there's like this kind of, um, well, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect because I'm disconnecting from my emotions now.
Dissociating. Yeah, yeah,
And there's this dissociation. And then as I do that more, I start to identify more with the thing that was uncomfortable at first, because most new things are uncomfortable,
mhm,
and because they're unfamiliar, and a lot of fear rises from not knowing what's out there.
right.
But once we start to experience it, we become more familiar with it. That feeling of dissociation sometimes starts to become that observer becomes
Yeah,
what I am more and more. And so I think that's why, for me, a daily practice is beneficial, because
mhm,
then I can reinforce that and I can get into that state and say, oh, okay, like, and then I can start to do it when I'm not meditating. I can
yes,
start to actually have it, experience it in my life. Like, oh, I'm really anxious right now. What's going on here? Oh, I
yes, yeah.
don't
That's the
have to
whole
be.
point of zazen, is to get to the point where you're recognizing the feelings that are coming up, and instead of, well, you're taking that time, you're stepping back from those feelings and emotions. Ultimately, what it ends up doing is buys you a few seconds, milliseconds even, between an emotion and you recognizing it. It's just stepping back instead of immediately responding to that emotion. You've trained yourself now to, oh, observed. I see, why am I feeling that? Why am I feeling angry? Oh, it's because of whatever's going on. Um, the idea is to buy yourself time to respond rather than react to your emotions.
So there's this pause.
There's a slight pause.
this
It
pause
might just be
between
milliseconds,
stimulus
but
and response.
yes.
And that has to, I really think that has to be trained. It has to be developed.
Well, that's what the practice of meditation and Zazen gets you. Yeah.
And you can increase it. So once you're able to increase that to the point where you can actually insert rational thought, it's very useful for it's very useful for social interaction.
Yes. Oh, it's been one of the books that I was reading. I could not find. I must have loaned it to someone. The Three Pillars of Zen. It was a very good introduction to the whole Zen Buddhism. But at any rate, the author in there said something that kind of stuck with me. He said that you won't necessarily notice a change in practicing Zazen, sitting meditation. You won't necessarily notice a change, but people around you may. So he says, if I ever heard my child saying, "Oh, I wish Father wouldn't sit Zazen, he gets so wound up, or so angry or whatever. I wish he wouldn't do that." If I ever heard them say that, I would stop. He says, but the opposite is what happens. And I found that true in my life even. It gave me enough to step back to sort of change my perspective. And my partner, who's been with her now for 12 years or so, 10 years at this house. And but she sort of saw the change in me as I was starting to do this, enough so that she's just like, I want to help these people out. And she volunteered as the bookkeeper, and we got all the right people together at the right time. She's a wonderful numbers-oriented person, organized the books quite a bit with the treasurer. Between the two of them, they worked out a process. But she did all of that and has been doing that for 3 years now, just because she was impressed with the changes that it was making in me. And I had to, and it was just crazy. Yeah.
So
it does work.
when you hear when people talk, I think because of the unfamiliarity with Zen in the West and in a Judeo-Christian culture, sometimes there's this otherworldly kind of New Age mysticism kind of aspect that people attach to it,
yeah.
which is so. But so you'll hear things like, when you drop a pebble in a pond, the ripples on the surface, right, expand.
Right.
And so that's what you're talking about, I think, in a very practical way. This is not some hocus pocus. I mean, you can believe in that metaphysical aspect of it if you wish.
Yeah.
But even if you don't believe in that metaphysical aspect of it, there's no doubt that having more peace, I mean, yeah, we're not going to be like the ultimate, we're not all going to be the Dalai Lama. We're not all going to be smiling and saying the right thing all the time. But if we do it slightly more often, there's going to be like effects in our personal relationships and therefore in their attitudes, and it just expands further,
I was a very devout Christian for a long time, and just really got into it. Consider myself evangelical at one point. Read the Bible, like I'm sure you have, cover to cover a couple of times, different versions, just to see what the differences were.
Sure.
And there's some really slow, sloggy parts, but yeah, you get a feel for it. And at any rate, a few of the things just to lay out for anybody watching this. Buddhism it's a philosophy that has religious trappings, I would argue. There are some that are very religious. And again, that's what I mean. There's different flavors. So something like Tibetan Buddhism, where it's an amalgam of Buddhism and shamanism, that's very religious. And some of the Theravadan through Southeast Asia, yeah, they can be very religious about it. But really, especially Zen, took all of this stuff and said, just like a typical the kind of Japanese approach to it, let's minimize it. Let's get it down to its core. And they kind of took all this stuff and said, this works, this is good. Or Dogen did that. This works, this is good. Here's what we're going to do. And he focused in on the things that made sense for him and worked for him.
What do you think those things? So what do you think those things are? Like if you had to just give a paragraph to somebody and that was all they were going to know about Zen.
Elevator pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be hard. But like what would you say? Like
I would say it's not a religion. We don't worship Buddha, don't worship the statues. Buddha would be appalled at seeing the statues in any of the places. He'd be appalled at it. You're not supposed to be worshiped. That's not what I was writing about. He would not like that. So we're not worshiping. The whole bowing that you do is we acknowledge the Buddhahood, the Buddha nature in everybody. Every one of us is considered to be a sleeping Buddha. We're just not awake yet. We don't realize what's going on in the world, or what our nature is. So you're bowing to that unwoken nature in each other. So it's acknowledging that, and you acknowledge representation of Buddha, but you're not worship. So just to put that at ease, that was one major concern I had coming into it. That said, there are people who practice Buddhism along with and still go to their churches and are very active.
Christian church.
We jokingly call them Judists. A lot of Jewish folks get into Buddhism also. A lot of Christians and so on. I don't know about Hindus, and so I haven't met many that would be in Buddhism as well. But I mean, it's common. It's not. There's nothing about Buddhists. We don't say, no, you can't be a Christian. You've got to convert.
Right. Right.
You may get grief from your pastor. You may get grief from your church hierarchy, but we don't care. It's what we care about is, are you a sentient being? Is one of the main things. Are you a sentient being? Okay, you've got Buddha nature. Welcome. So that's kind of the key. So if I was going to give somebody an elevator pitch, what I like about Zen is we practice the meditation for 40 minutes. We take that Zazen mind, that meditative mind that we've been in, and we move into a period of Soji following meditation, a little bit of chanting, then followed by a 20-minute period of Soji, which is simple work. It can be something like sweeping, cleaning, dusting. Generally, it's just straightening up around the zendo, cleaning around the grounds, whatever strikes you or whatever the need is at the moment. If there's like leaves down, yeah, let's rake everything. We're raking today. But it is meant to be done quietly and meditatively with as little talking as necessary as possible. So you're taking Zazen, the meditation, and you're putting it into motion. And you're practicing putting it into motion. The next thing then is a Dharma talk for about 20 minutes or so, followed by a social period where you are still, so you're moving from in your mind, starting to put it in action, bring it out in the world, getting a little pep talk, and then interacting with people on a social level, all while trying to maintain that mind, keeping that Zazen, that mind going, that state of mind going. For me, that has been a wonderful practice. And it's one thing to be all theory and sit in, and you could sit there and read books about Zen, but until you actually get on the mat, get on the cushion, now you're putting it into action. Then put it into simple motion meditation. Now start applying it to people. Kotoku, the priest, has said he wants to put a sign up over the doors on the inside, saying, now entering the Zendo as you leave, because the real Zendo is outside of it. He's like, the real Zendo is outside this building. It's not in here. This is just where we all gather. The real Zendo is out there.
So that's great. That has so many parallels to what I've been focusing on in my own. So you talked about the bowing, and that's actually like a practice that they do in yoga, which I do yoga as well. And the namaste, I recognize the light in you, you recognize the light in me. Very similar. We just recognize each other as fellow human beings, And the fact that there is a spark, there's this spark of sentient life, like you said, and I think that's really important, and it helps because, if I'm in a difficult conversation with someone, if I'm in a situation where people are stressed, if I can remember that, if I can remember, like you'll hear the phrase, we're all, what's the phrase that's been going around the internet lately? It's we're all in the same storm, but not on the same boat. No, we're all simple children of God, or something of that nature. It's the idea that we're all equal in a very real way. In a very real way. We're semi-divine. We're stuck between like something greater than ourselves. We're certainly not like entirely slaves to our reactions, like autonomous animals, of life forms that just react to stimuli. So we can do something, in between those spaces. We can direct our thoughts and our intentions. I think that's important, but also what you were talking about as far as taking the message into life.
Into action.
You know,
Yeah.
how many times did I read like the Stoic philosophers? You know, I'd read, you know, Socrates and but how, you know, the problem with reading, I love reading
How
those.
do I bring it into action? Yeah.
How do I
yeah,
make it
totally.
an action? Right. The school of thought is some of that still survives, but the methods that they used in order to practice that are gone, as far as I can tell,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, any of those
Mhm.
surviving texts. So what we really had was like this kind of fossil, and we really don't know what the flesh around it was.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And that's what Zen is still living. You know, like you said, it's, you know, been you know, since the 12th century. So
Well, this goes back. The original Buddhism goes back
yeah,
35
the
or
original Buddhism
2,500
goes
years.
back to, was
2,500,
it
2,500, 2,600 years ago.
500 BC or somewhere around there?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
500 BC has this magic thing. Like I think that also at the same time, Taoism comes up, like
I
starts
believe
to
so. Yeah. Yeah.
somewhere around there. Laosa comes around as well. So that's kind of this. Anyway, and then the other thing that you were talking about taking this, the Zendo is the world and going out and doing the Zendo out there.
Mhm.
You know, I would laugh. We would go to church, and my father would point this out to us, and he would say things like, you know, we're all holy in the church, but then we get out in the parking lot, and everybody's racing to get out of this funnel, you know, like taking the cars down the, you know, to get back on the road and have to get on with their day. So it's kind of funny, you know, it's, you know, all those lessons we just learned 10 minutes ago have not been applied to real life. People are swearing at each other and honking their horns and whatnot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
That was part of what was beginning to drive me away. I like to say that Christians drove me away from Christianity. You know, it's just like it's.
well, I'm not here to bash any
Oh, I'm just saying,
particular.
my personal
Yeah.
walk. That's it. That's what sort of
Yeah,
helped push me along. Like, this isn't for me anymore.
but for those who
I'm
can
not
take a
one of
joke, there's this great joke where there's a man praying. He says, "God, please save me from your followers."
those. Yeah, yeah. Or
But
even
that could be
Gandhi's quote.
interpreted in multiple ways. You know,
Exactly. Or
that
even
could be
Gandhi's quote
fanatics.
too. Yeah.
That could
yeah,
be anything in particular. But I just thought, I always loved the irony of.
Yeah.
I like ironic humor. So.
Yes.
And actually, Zen has a lot of. There's a lot of irony in some of the Zen teachings too, because there are what they call koans, right?
Mhm.
And those are kind of like, well, tell me what you know, I could tell you what my thought of what a koan is, but you know far better than I do what it is. So,
Well, the only I know probably as much as you, because koans are not emphasized as so much in Soto.
okay,
Rinzai is all about koans.
Right.
They're a koan study that you will be on, and typically, as I understand it, your priest would assign you a koan to work on, and you have to come up with an answer. And there was a koan, or and one classic koan is it was more of a question to a master. Does a dog have, the two monks were arguing, they went to, well, let's go to the master. They go to the master and ask him and says, Master, does a dog have Buddha nature? And the master sat there for a moment and just said, Ma, and walked away. And Ma means everything from absolutely yes to kind of sort of no. You know, it's like it's all blended in with this ambiguity of, it's like yes and no, both in there. But largely no, not really, but it could, but it doesn't. You know, it's
dogs are a hard case though. Dogs are really hard case.
Is a classic.
Dogs just seem to have, you know, they're just they sometimes they seem really intelligent and very like aware and very like know what their emotions are, and then other times they're just total like animals, you know, like they just you know, like, oh, there's a squirrel, boom, gone, you know. But then they've got the ones that like, you know, oh, my master's feeling anxious, I'll put my head on her lap, you know, like, you know. So there's this weird, but so it's very, I think that it's also there's a the I don't know what you call him, philosopher or whatnot. His name's Eckhart Tolle.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure you've come across him.
Mm-hmm.
He said at one point, I've lived with three Zen masters. All of them are cats.
Yeah.
And you know, it's interesting. You recognize not just the humanity, you recognize like the life force in living things,
Yeah. Mhm.
And I think you talked to me about that, like when you cleared land at the center,
Mhm.
and you kind of say like to, I'm here now. I'm here to help. I'm here to organize.
It's my little prayer to the forest when I go to work on the trails, and just
Yeah.
ask to the spirits, whatever spirits may be there, that I'm not here to destroy it. I just want to work on this trail so that others can come along here and enjoy you too. Enjoy your
And it's,
presence. So,
it's so even if you don't believe in a metaphysical world, it's
mm,
just, it's a healthy form of respect for other living things
right.
and even other inanimate objects. And I think that that sort of display, that sort of unconscious, well, it's a conscious intent when you're praying or you're saying that, even if you're just saying in your mind. But from what you were saying, when other people observe that sort of behavior, and then they see, a peaceful nature. And I think one of the things that I've really learned is that more and more is that I'm a monkey. Like I'm basically like a slightly maybe a different monkey. I don't even want to say more evolved. I'm just evolved on a different path in another direction. Not talking about a hierarchy, but I still have a lot of attributes that monkeys have, and monkeys like imitate behavior. And they live in troops and they have a little societies. And when I'm in a certain group, I tend to act a certain way. And when I'm in another group, I tend to act a certain way.
Yeah.
But at least now I'm aware of it. And I sometimes can choose to act in my perceived role in that group or not
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
and change it. So, and I think that kind of, we talk about crowd mentalities and things of that nature. There's only so much you can do in a large crowd. If you're funneling out of the Steeler game and you're all like in that hallway, there's only so much you can do to affect the people around you,
Yeah.
and it's why I tend to try not to be in large crowds for very often, at least not in confined spaces. Although that's kind of verboten now anyway. But but it's just the nature, the communal nature of human beings. Sometimes in larger groups, it evolves to the basis element.
There
Or a
was a
baser
meme.
element,
Yeah, there was a meme similar to that ages ago, but it was at a music festival, bands playing, and whoever the camera person is, just pans around and catches this one guy on the hillside, crowd of people, most people sitting down, and he's just jamming, he's just dancing, and he's actually just dancing, having fun dancing. And then soon enough, one of his friends runs up and starts dancing too, and then somebody else runs up, and pretty soon the whole hillside is just jamming out dancing, just because one person had the nerve to stand up and start doing something different. And
That's a really good point. That's a really great analogy. I love that. Yeah. So you can be a positive influence in your group,
yeah.
and not, and it's not a crusading element. It's not like you were talking earlier about evangelical. It's not, it can be done without that kind of, I don't know, for me, off-putting kind of like, no, you must believe what I believe because I'm right. This is why, that doesn't seem to work too much, at least not for, it doesn't work on me too much, I don't think.
No, right. Yeah. And it gradually faded from influence for me as well.
Yeah. Well, I still am susceptible to advertising, I think. But I think
that hits at a baser level, I think,
well, it's repetition. What it does is it wears me down. It's just, I see the same ad over and over and over and over. And then eventually I get hit at a weak moment when I've already been, eroded. My resistance to that has been eroded by that or other things. And I'm like, yes, I do need a new set of stainless steel knives that never rust.
That never rust and cut through cans, right?
Where's my credit card?
Oh yeah.
But there was Socrates who said he would go through the market and say to his followers, I just like to look at all of the things that I can live without.
Hmm.
Just kind of interesting, because there's something to that. I mean, I don't have to live an ascetic lifestyle.
No.
I'm pretty frugal, but I don't have to, do without anything that I need. But I also don't have to be caught up in consumerism for the sake of consumerism.
As a parallel to that, the whole foundation of Buddhism, what Gautama Buddha came up with after his meditation, after his realization, and he basically did the whole gamut. He was born from a very wealthy family, wanted for nothing, but he was never allowed outside the walls of the palace as a child. So as a young teen or so, he just rides off, and he sees people dying. He sees dying in the street, sick people, old people, and he started to realize this could happen to me someday too. That he wasn't protected from it, and so he started to think, well, what is this? Why? Why are we doing this? Why do we do this? And why do I get to live in the palace and they don't? And so that started him on his road of meditation. He became an ascetic, and he basically pursued many different schools of thought. One of which was the world is bad, so we have to remove the total asceticism, remove himself from it, and almost to the point of starvation. He almost died from it, and that's where you see the statues of the starving Buddha, because he really did. He went to that extreme, and he had already lived a life of luxury. He went to the extreme of asceticism, and during his meditations, he realized, no, there's a middle way between these two. This is what I should do, and that's whenever he came up with the four noble truths, and the four noble truths are. Let me make sure I don't get this wrong.
Okay.
Because that'll be embarrassing.
Yeah, I've heard of the Four Noble Truths. That's a big deal. And the middle way, I think, is really a wonderful thing for me because, unfortunately, being in a Western discipline, education, which is, one could argue, is largely founded on the Greeks. The Greeks were very much into dualism, right? They were very much into male and female, up and down, heaven and earth, two poles on a continuum. And so I tended to learn how the world worked based on extremes. However, sometimes I forget that those are the extremes, that they are less likely. It's more like a bell curve, right? That those incidents may happen, but they're least likely to occur, and that most things happen in the middle. And so it's really important for me to remember that I'm supposed to be in the middle of the stream, middle of the thought.
Well, these Four Noble Truths tie back to what you're talking about, consuming and advertising and so on. Was
sure.
You basically realized life is pain, life is suffering, or the word was dukkha, and dukkha, a lot of times it's translated as pain, but that's not really entirely. It's more, I like to consider it, I think it's more along the lines of ennui. This general malaise, general unsatisfied.
Like dissatisfaction with what's
going on. Yeah, it covers everything from a child crying because he didn't get a cupcake to, somebody suffering from cancer. It covers all of that. Dukkha covers that whole range of just unhappiness, of pain, suffering. That's what life is.
Gotcha.
And he realized it's caused by craving, by a desire. Craving is one word. Desire is the more classic. And that desire can be desire for food, desire for attention, desire, anything that you're desired to, and also attachments. So you become attached to this thing because it makes you happy. But after a while, what happens though is we become familiar with it. And so the thing that made you happy no longer is quite as satisfying, particularly with, say, drugs or alcohol. It's like,
well, it's like the first
ice cream, a little more.
On a hot day, you go and get that ice cream cone, and that first bite of ice cream is like, oh, this is so good.
Now I got it.
And then the second one's good, and the third one's good. But then I'm like, okay, now I got to finish this ice cream cone before it melts. You know what I mean? Like, it's just.
But dukkha even goes to the next day when you're thinking, I could go for an ice cream cone. That's dukkha too. That's that desire. That.
So it's sustained by the fulfillment of it.
Well, somewhat.
Somewhat.
It's offset, but it's never as much. That's the nature of the nature of the world, yeah, it fades. It's like, okay, that first bite was great, but now I got to deal
Sure.
with all of this.
If
So
I go out and buy a sports car tomorrow, I'm going to really enjoy that sports car, probably for a couple months,
until the next model comes out.
every time I get in that sports car, I'm gonna be like, wow, this is really awesome. And then, but I think even that, like you said, that will fade eventually.
Mhm.
I
So he
remember when
realized that, yeah.
yeah, but
And he said,
the,
okay, there's a way to get out of this. He said that whole craving and desire. And he says there's a way to break out of it. And that's where the Eightfold Path comes in,
Mhm.
which is right
Oh,
mind.
what are the four noble truths, by the way? Did you find it?
Yes, yes. So life is pain. It's caused by desire and craving. There is a way to end this desire and craving, and that's by following the Eightfold Path. So it
Gotcha.
sort of like leads into the next thing.
And then the Eightfold Path. I think I just read it. Well, I did. I read a Titch, not Han, book. It was about the Eightfold Path, and I have to admit, I was a little bogged down by that. But the yeah. So I don't know if we'll go into that.
Yeah, that's a little deeper in, but basically it's just think of it like and not so much thou shalt nots like the Ten Commandments,
Yeah.
but more like if you are looking to attain enlightenment and release from dukkha, from this cycle, this samsara cycle of pain, then live this way.
So they're like suggestions.
Yes, very much so.
Gotcha. So it's like we're not
And
telling you what to do, but this has
you
worked for
this
other
is
people.
efficacious. Yeah, this is good for getting you to the end, to the end point of not craving so much.
So
And
this past year, I had a reading group. We read some of the Buddhism, which is why I wanted to talk to you, but we also read Stoicism. There's a lot of neat parallels. The Stoics also talked about, desire and
Mhm.
not trying to attain things which were out of your ability to control, right? And
Right.
being able to understand the difference. And that was what their idea was, that that's what leads to suffering, trying to control what we can't control and only focusing on what we can. But there's so much in the middle that we have partial influence over.
Right.
And that's the area that you really need to work on, right? So and also the idea that, like, even if things aren't like, even though you can't control your health to a great degree, you can control it to some degree, but you can't completely control your health. You still recognize it is desirable to have good health. There's nothing wrong with wanting to have good health and enjoying it while you have it. So, so that was the thing. I think a lot of times people get it, this idea that like you were talking about this, the phase that Gautama went through, where he denied the world and denied its pleasures. That's an extreme way to go, and maybe you learn a lesson in that. But you can still practice a this idea of Zen and enjoy life's pleasures, as long as you understand they're ephemeral. They may be addictive, and but it's okay to participate in life. You don't have to like just say, well, I'm going to go and live in the mountain and not deal with people. I mean, that's almost, I don't want to like deny anybody who's been on that path, but in a sense, it may also be considered a cop out. It's like, that's, it's harder to deal with people than it is to like isolate oneself, so one doesn't have to, right? Now, maybe for at the beginning, when one is learning, you go to a retreat so that you can simply focus on things intensely without the distractions of the world. But eventually, we're gonna leave the dojo, or I'm sorry, what did the
Zendo.
The
Zendo.
Zendo. We're going to leave the Zendo and we're going to go back out into the world, which is the real Zendo, as you said, as your preset. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, regarding the Eightfold Path and all that ties into the precepts that a Buddhist would take if they're going to become sort of a lay ordained, which is a whole different thing, different things in the different worlds. So in the Eastern Japan, Soto Zen, in Japan, it's different. Soto Zen is different there than it is here. And we can talk a little bit about that, but basically the precepts that you take are paralleling the Eightfold Path, basically saying, I'm going to refrain from killing. I'm going to refrain from doing this. I should refrain from doing that. The idea, and you're saying I shall refrain from, I'm going to refrain from it, isn't mean it doesn't say, boom, it's going to be done. It's more, you have to, we were instructed that each Buddhist has to look at that and say, how am I going to do that in my life? How am I going to implement not killing? You know, some people like take it to extremes, and you know, like the Jainists don't step on bugs. You know, that's a whole different thing, but similar thing. They don't even want to step on bugs. They'll sweep the ground in front of them because they don't want to kill them. Buddhists are similar. They may adopt it as I'm not going to eat meat. I'm just going to eat vegetarian. There is no requirement to be a vegetarian, but some people interpret that that's how they adopt it into their life. That precept of not killing. So similarly,
glad you brought that up, because I was going to ask you about that. I know a lot of people think that, you know, in order to be a Buddhist, you must be a vegan or some sort of thing.
No,
but that's not true.
In fact, Kotoku had said that basically, you'll see more in Japan, the monks out with beggar bowls, and they're just sitting meditating with a bowl in front of them. And the idea is, if you've got extra rice, whatever, money is always good. Money buys food. But if you give them a slice of beef, you give them a steak, they'll take it. They'll put it in this. Thank you, and they'll have it later in the day. They're not going to refuse it. However, if you were to say, "We butchered this for you, here for your order. Here's a leg of the cow," yeah, they would probably refuse that, because then they would be responsible for the death of that animal. And no, I don't want to do that. But if you're giving,
they don't want to encourage that behavior.
They don't want to encourage it. Yeah.
Sure.
So also another thing that is a little sticking point is one of the precepts is not drinking, and that's a very loose translation of it. Kotoku said he interprets it. His study of it is it's a little more along the lines of, don't be stupid with intoxicants. Don't drink yourself stupid. You know? Enjoy them. Enjoy it. You know, the middle road again. Enjoy it. Just don't get stupid with it.
So it's more about gluttony.
More about gluttony. Don't be a glutton with it.
Right? Okay, that makes sense. Gotcha. Yeah, that's good. I was just watching something about Thailand, and there's a order, and they go out and they beg door to door, and people know they're coming, so they'll prepare. Or they'll give them part of their evening meal and give it to them in the morning, whatever they have left over, and they'll give it, and they'll go around and collect. And sometimes there's meat in there, they'll eat it. Yes. And you know, the idea also is like, you know, in order to meditate, which they're in their sense, they're doing the meditation for the people who don't have time to meditate at the level that they are. So they're trying, you know, they're part of the world that they're trying to whatever it is, send good vibes, whatever you want to believe. But but that's part of the whole. So they're recognized as having a useful, they're useful members of society, but they don't have time to raise animals and farm and that sort of thing. So they depend on charity in order to do that. So the other people get the benefits of their prayers and their meditations. So, but oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Oh, I know what it was. It was you have to be alive in order to meditate. So you have to sustain the physical organism. So you don't let yourself die. You don't starve yourself to death. That has no, that is not a useful activity. So if there's nothing else to eat, and you've taken a vow that you will never eat meat, and the only thing left to eat is meat, you eat the meat. You know what I mean? Like, and then you could go back to your vow later, that would be an idea. Now, I don't know. I mean, maybe there are sects or individuals who say it doesn't matter.
I'm sure
that's what their vow was. They will not break their vow. But that seems to be more of the middle path idea.
For anyone curious, if you're checking out, there are many different flavors. Don't think because you talk to a Buddhist that, okay, now I know what Buddhism is. There's many different flavors, I'd say check out it. If you're serious about it, go visit a temple, talk to the priest. Each one functions differently, has different approaches.
Well, this is great. I'm glad. I think this is a great introduction for people, and I learned a lot as well. So I know we assigned an hour to this, so I don't want to take you far over the hour. But I hope that this is the beginning of many conversations, because this was really
Absolutely.
interesting.
Yeah.
Good. And if anybody has any questions, put them in the comments below, and then that'll set us up for the next conversation. We'll try to answer those questions as best we can. And Craig, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Recognize the Buddha nature.
Yes, indeed.
Have a great day. Everyone
you.
out there, see if you can do something nice for somebody today without getting caught. Take care.